Hey, what's up everyone? Raging Golden Eagle here, having way too much fun as always. And you guys know the drill by now. We're about halfway through the summer current year anime season, so I figured that's about enough time for me to pick out my favorites and announce them to you. So first off, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, and that being the show you see in the screenshot right now, Symphogear. Now in its 4th season, it is once again unlicensed, so fan subs are the only option here. And since I am a huge Symphogear fanboy, I sure as hell am not gonna wait to see if maybe it'll be licensed sometime in the future. And honestly, I'm kinda disappointed because I thought this shit was settled by now. Once Crunchyroll got the 3rd season and then the 1st and 2nd as well, I thought we were set, I thought it was saved. But apparently not. And for a show this big to not be licensed, you know the reason has to be political. And this is just speculation on my part here, but I bet the reason could be Crunchyroll's new buddy-buddy relationship with Funimation. And the reason I say this is because Funimation's failed partnership with Nico Nico is what brought us the 1st season, and everything after that has just been up in the air. So I'm willing to bet that someone there may hold a grudge against Funimation. Though seeing how they butchered Dragon Maid's dub by adding in a whole bunch of their SJW bullshit, I'm not that happy with them either. But politics aside, I really love how they just jumped straight into the action this time around. The story is just kind of organically forming around the action, funny enough. If you liked the first 3 seasons, you're definitely gonna like this one. Though by that same token, if you're unfamiliar with the series, this is not a good place to jump on. You're not gonna have any idea what's going on, what these people are talking about, who any of them are, nothing. They waste no time explaining any of that. It's just kind of assumed if you're this far in the show, you know. It may be licensed at some indeterminate point in the future like the 2nd season eventually was, but if you want to watch it, just watch the fan subs, cause for the foreseeable future that's gonna be your only option. So you could pretty much do this guilt-free. Now on a slightly more complicated note, you got Netflix. And I'm gonna say Netflix, holy shit. You can do your own original shows all day, that's fine. But please don't go licensing something for streaming if you don't intend to simulcast it. In this day and age, do you really think people are gonna wait to watch Fate Apocrypha, which is one of the best shows of this season, huh? No, everyone's gonna go for the fan subs of that too. So either way, for those of you who are gonna inevitably complain about it, that's why this show is not on the list. I generally try to be a good boy and limit it to shows that you can legally stream. But now that all that BS is out of the way, we get to the honorable mentions, which consist of either continuing shows that I already talked about earlier, or those that just barely missed making the list. First up, New Game Season 2. If you liked the 1st season, which is basically cute girls making video games, you're gonna find a lot more of the same here. Except this time with more focus on the actual development process at a mid to large sized Japanese company. So if that behind the scenes stuff interests you, you're definitely gonna want to check this out. Next up, Sakura Quest, which has gotten even stronger than the last season actually. This time they've finally gotten into the quest in the title. Our heroes are now trying to revive a dead festival, but in order to do that, they have to find those 3 freaking festival treasures. So yeah, it kind of did turn into an actual quest. And next up, after a multi-year hiatus, we got the 4th season of Hellgirl. Kinda like with Symphogear, if you like the first 3 seasons, you're definitely gonna want to check this one out. Or if you think the concept of selling your soul to hell in order to get revenge and get your target's soul sent to hell is interesting, you may want to check it out for that as well. Now we get to one of the big ones of this season, Rage of Bahamut Virgin Soul. This 2nd season now being twice as long as the 1st one was, and seems to be getting stronger with each episode. Shit's already hit the fan multiple times, and I'm quite sure there's a whole lot more left to throw at it. So this one definitely continues to be strong. Just like My Hero Academia. It definitely quieted down quite a bit after the League of Villains attack at the end of the 1st season, but now, just like the 1st season, may have started off a bit quiet and innocent, only to ramp up to a bunch of life or death battles that we are now getting a taste of. And speaking of ramping up, Recreators is getting into its final battle as well, which should be pretty damn interesting because it seems the villain knows all about the hero's plans to take her down, and doesn't seem all that concerned by him. Not gonna spoil anything, but that entire plan is pretty damn absurd, but then again this entire show is. We're at the point now where how they handle this last fight is either gonna make or break the entire show, but I'm still hoping for the best. And finally we have The Reflection. In case you guys were wondering what Stan Lee has been doing since wiping his hands of Marvel, Well, his new company, POW Entertainment, is now going back once again to Japan and is creating his own original superhero works over there. The first episode of this show was kind of all over the place and a bit of a clusterfuck, honestly, but since then they've actually done a pretty good job of bringing everything together. If I had a few more episodes to go on, I could have made a much more educated call on this one, but this show started late, so unfortunately that's not an option. But so far, it's looking promising unless they really drop the ball. Whew, man, now that that's out of the way, we can finally get to the proper list. And yeah, you heard that right, everything up until this point were the honorable mentions. But either way, let's get started. First up, we got Isekai Shokudo, or Restaurants to Another World, which, as the name implies, is this season's resident food porn show, with a little bit of a fantasy twist on it. The twist here being is you got a regular Japanese restaurant, where every 7th night, doors apparently linking to this restaurant appear in some alternate fantasy world. And this, of course, leads to a whole bunch of people not knowing what the hell is going on stumbling into the place, only to be fed the best thing they've ever eaten, and this somehow drastically changes their life for the better. This is overall a very episodic show, with a few exceptions, each episode covering a new customer or two. And as the show goes on, it's done a little bit of a better job going into each of these people's backstories before they got into the restaurant and afterwards. But that's definitely the formula this show seems to have settled on. I don't know if that's going to change in the future or not, but this is the type of show you watch mostly for the food porn. And on that end, it definitely delivers. And now, as can be expected from one of my lists, we make the drastic tone shift to slapstick comedy. Cause now we arrive at Aho Girl, or Idiot Girl basically. And this show should be a godsend to all of you out there complaining about guys being physically abused by girls all the time in anime. Cause this time around, oh man, do the roles reverse. Though I will say, unlike those shows where the guy gets abused, this girl does kind of deserve it, cause she is definitely an idiot as the title implies. Every time she gets punched in the face or knocked through the ceiling or German suplexed, she did do something to deserve it. And the best part is, as dumb as she is, she's actually capable of making some very good points and backing them up with some very decent arguments from time to time. So good, in fact, that it scares the other characters because they realize they're being out-argued by a total moron. So if you like the more physical kind of slapstick comedy, this time with the genders reversed so you get something actually a little bit new out of the deal, definitely check this one out. Every time I watch a new episode, I'm generally laughing the entire way through it. Funny enough, exactly like this next show on the list. Mahojin Guru Guru, or Magical Circle Guru Guru. Now don't be scared off by the art style. When I first saw the screenshots myself, my initial reaction was, oh, this is probably another one of those kids shows, I could probably pass it up. Then I started reading glowing reviews from people whose opinion I actually trust, and realized I had to go check it out. And damn am I glad I did. Despite the initial impression you may get from seeing these screenshots, this show is 50% making fun of those old school classical RPGs, and 50% butt and poop jokes. I laugh at both of those things, so I definitely was not going to pass this one up. And so far has not disappointed me. As I just said at the beginning, I usually laugh my way through the entire episode when this comes on. This is one of those rare shows that's actually able to mix humor that's safe for kids with humor that pretty much only adults would find funny, and have it actually be funny to both crowds. So whether you're a fan of nerdy old school RPG humor or butt and poop jokes, you're definitely going to find your way laughing through this show. And from that, we do another tone shift to this season's resident sexy show, Hajimete no Gal, or My First Girlfriend is a Gal. One of the rare few high school romantic comedy harem shows that I actually still find funny. And hey, the fan service ain't hurting either. In fact, it's actually pretty decent. Now, the storyline itself isn't exactly a bastion of originality. Main character's a pretty average, unpopular guy who basically gets forced by his friends to ask out one of the most popular girls in school, and to everybody's surprise, she actually accepts. And this, of course, leads to some other girls who've had their eyes on him suddenly becoming a lot more aggressive about it, and a whole shitload of trashy and hilarious fan service ensues. And on the comedy front, I have to say the best parts of this show are when you're inside of the main character's mind and all of his various alter egos are kinda duking it out. One of them being a hentai kamen-based personification of his lust. So overall, pretty funny with some decent fan service. It's been a long time since I've seen a pretty decent example of a show like this, but this one's definitely been making a good impression so far. Though not as good of an impression as this next show. which in my opinion is definitely one of the contenders for best of the season. And just like with Mahojin Guru Guru, I bet a lot of people passed it up just because of the art style. And for everyone who's been keeping up with the season and not watching the screenshots, that should have given it all away. Because now we get to Made in Abyss. This is the type of show that I really wish we had more of. It's just bursting at the seams with the spirit of adventure. You know, one of the things that makes One Piece the biggest anime ever? You kinda think that would have given people a hint, right? Well, luckily some people are catching on. And the story behind this one is actually pretty cool. This one takes place on an island seemingly just out in the middle of the ocean that happens to have a gigantic pit/dungeon in the center of it. And this ain't just your typical dungeon either. I mean, yeah, some of the cliches are there. I mean, the further down you go, the more dangerous and exotic the monsters and environments get. But there's more to the danger of the abyss than just that. The further down you go, the more of a toll it takes on your health. And more importantly, the harder it is to climb back out. Because the further down you go, the more screwed up you become as you ascend. And for those of you who are experienced divers, it's kind of the same thing you guys deal with. You go down too deep and you ascend too quickly and you're gonna get screwed up. Except the implication here is if you go too far down, you're never gonna be able to make it back. And the very bottom of this abyss happens to be exactly where our main characters want to go. One of them to find her mom and the other to find out what the hell he is. And again, just like with Guru Guru, do not be turned off by the art style. Just seeing that, it's pretty easy to just brush this off as a stupid kids show. But it's anything but. Well, it's definitely for the most part safe for kids to watch, but it is an extremely competent action-adventure story, with most of the focus being on the adventure. And that is one genre that I think needs a lot more attention. So everybody should check this one out. It doesn't matter what you're into. It's just that damn good. And the next show on this list bears more than a few similarities to The Legend of Arslan. There definitely may have been some inspiration involved, but when it comes to Altera: Record of Battles, so far I think it's done enough to make itself very different from Arslan. First off, while the main characters of both shows may have been kind of naive when it comes to the ways of the world, this time around the main character is actually a lot more of a badass. And he's also known as the Golden Eagle General, so yeah, I love it. And another huge difference from Arslan is the fact that this guy starts out pretty much all the way at the top, and suffers quite an epic fall from grace, and now has to work his way back up all over again from the very bottom. All while trying to prevent a war with a much stronger nation, or at the very least save as many lives as possible. And I do especially love some of the little life lessons they shove into this show. For example, one character that they were making out to be a little bit of a villain at first, you kinda see in a new light along with the main character of this show, once it's exposed how naive and ignorant he's been. And I think that's actually something pretty cool that we don't get to see a lot of these days. Someone who looks like they're a villain at first glance until you actually see what they're doing and why and realize that they're just a whole lot smarter than you and they're playing 4D chess. So anyway, if you liked Arslan, you're definitely going to want to check this one out. Although only if you're capable of enjoying it for what it is and not making constant comparisons. And for those of you who haven't seen Arslan, if you want to see a very decent fantasy show that's a lot more influenced by the Middle East than the traditional European stuff you're used to, definitely give this a shot. And with that, we do yet another drastic tone shift, and arrive at my favorite of this season's Cute Girls Doing Cute Things shows, Hina Logi from Luck and Logic. And no, I didn't mispronounce or misspell that, that's how it appears in the Japanese. They just turned it into Hina Logic for here in the West. And I'm gonna confess right now, I actually liked the original Luck and Logic. It was a guilty pleasure of mine. Oh yeah, did it have a lot of flaws, but I was able to still enjoy it. But you do not have to have any experience with that show to get into this one because they really don't have much to do with each other. Well, they take place in the same setting, except this one's a few years later. But whereas the first show was a magic battle show, this one takes place after the battle has been resolved and is a lot more about cute girls doing cute things, with the occasional magical battling on the side. Though if you look at some of the foreshadowing that's been going on in this show, it may not stay that way. There's a pretty decent chance it's going to turn into a battle show again, in which case it's going to be pretty similar to magical girl shows. But so far, it's been all about cute girls doing cute things. So if that's the type of stuff you want to see, then, well, this is the best example of that from this season, according to my opinion anyway. Though if you disagree, you're more than welcome to have the wrong opinion if you really want to. And now we jump into some pretty epic action with Katsugeki Touken Ranbu. Now, that may sound a little bit familiar to you guys. And this is funny because, exactly like the previous show, This one actually did have a series earlier, and the tone was completely different. The first one was mostly about slice of life and cute boys and hot guys doing cute boy and hot guy things, with the occasional action thrown in. This time around, they completely flip. It's almost entirely focused on the action, with the occasional detour into hot guys and cute boys. Now for the Cliff Notes version, the basic gist of this show is it's pretty much like Kantai Collection but for girls. Where Kantai Collection had a whole bunch of girls who were actually battleships, Touken Ranbu is about a bunch of guys who are actually historical Japanese swords. Well, and spears and other weapons. Except unlike the first series, this one shifts so heavily towards the action end of the spectrum that it can easily be enjoyed by pretty much everybody. The girls can watch it for the hot guys, and the guys can watch it for the pretty damn epic swordplay. And even in that sense, they're kind of mixing it up compared to the first series as well. Yeah, sure, the main enemies are still a bunch of undead-looking historical revisionists trying to change history, but this time around, instead of attacking head-on, they seem to be trying a lot more subtle things like convincing actual people of that time to do their dirty work for them, which of course leads to a whole lot more action and drama. Overall, good stuff. If you're a fan of either great action or hot guys, then be sure to check this one out. And next up, we arrive at yet another strong contender for best anime of the season. Surprisingly, a completely original work this time around. This one being Princess Principal. And yeah, I know, I kinda facepalmed at the name myself. And while the name may turn a bunch of people off, as you actually get further into the show, the name actually does make sense as a reference to two of the characters. But either way, since the name isn't really giving too much up, what we have right here is a pretty damn awesome and competent steampunk spy story. Featuring, of course, a bunch of cute girls. And before anyone gets turned off by that, this is one of those shows that's good enough that it would have been awesome even without the cute girl main characters. It can stand on its own pretty well without relying on any moe, though it does use that to great effect at times, cause just like other shows before it like the now famous Madoka Magica, it does a pretty good job of contrasting the cute characters with the grim reality they're faced with. Like with any decent action-heavy spy story, there's quite a body count. And the show constantly makes you question whether or not anyone is really actually on these girls' side and has their backs. Or hell, if maybe even they'll turn on each other one of these days. One of their superiors, though, summed it up pretty nicely. There is no black and white in this world, it's all black and gray. So while everyone seems genuinely friendly and they do seem to get along and care about each other, deep down everyone has their own suspicions and their own goals they're working towards. Some of which may very well be at odds with the rest of the party. And going forward, I think those differences are going to be the strong point of this show. So if you like steampunk, decent spy stories, decent action, and of course cute girls, especially if you like all of the above, you definitely need to check this show out. I really don't understand why it's not towards the top of the rankings all the time. And last but not least, we get to the mecha show. Well, you guys thought I wasn't going to have a mecha show on my list? Pfft, just shows how well you know me. And of course I'm talking about Knights and Magic. The main character started out as just a regular genius programmer that happens to be a huge otaku and is into building robot model kits, but then he gets plastered by a car and reborn in a fantasy world. Yeah, we've heard that story like a billion times already, huh? And luckily for him, this fantasy world is basically heaven for him, cause now he gets a chance to finally make himself a big-ass epic robot of his own. And on that topic, I actually do like how they handle the politics of this situation, cause just think about the situation here. You have a genius from another world showing up and pretty much advancing your giant robot technology hundreds of years at a time within a matter of days, by himself. How do you think that will make his superiors in his country feel? What effect do you think something like this would have on the National Research Laboratory that was supposed to be doing this work? And on top of that, imagine what's going to happen when neighboring hostile nations figure this out. All that while you're doing your best to defend your own nation's borders against the giant monsters on the other side. So yeah, it's been pretty fun and lighthearted so far, but you can clearly see this entire storyline is just sitting on a powder keg getting ready to burst. So if you like mecha shows both from the perspective of fighting and building, cause this one gets into both, and this time with some pretty major political consequences for all of the main characters' innocent actions, you're definitely gonna have to watch this one. And with that, phew, this has gone on a lot longer than I expected it to. But rejoice those of you who have made it this far because we finally made it to the end of the list. Those were my favorite shows of this current season. Hopefully spread out among enough different genres that you could find something to enjoy. That's all I got to say, guys. Thanks for listening.